You're watching Next Pitch, the student athlete playbook for parents raising tomorrow's athletes.
Hi, Anthony Leverett's here, host of the Next Pitch podcast, and on behalf of my Emmy Award-winning producer, Jason Cardona, I am grateful that you are listening to this today. If you like what we're doing, I ask you this all the time, but if you like what we're doing, please share it with a friend. Best way to get the word out about our show is to share it with somebody. Give us a like, send us a message. Love to know that you're listening. Today, I am joined again. It's our first repeat guest by Alex Brink. Alex is a former quarterback at Washington State University and then played in the NFL and the Canadian Football League. He is a broadcaster, entrepreneur, and owns and runs a sports academy. And we talk about a lot of things today, but really dive into the recruiting process for all levels of athletes. So if you want to hear about what recruiting looks like in today's world, the impact of the transfer portal, the way the different levels work, how you can get seen, this is an episode for you. And amongst other things, we talk about it. I love talking to Alex. He's one of my favorite people. I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I did. Alex Brink, welcome to the show. I will have introduced you properly before, and people who've listened to the show have heard you before. You are our first repeat guest to have on the show. Our first guest and our first repeat guest. I thought that would be appropriate. Thanks for doing this, man.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So before we get started, just kind of briefly go back through your background of kind of where you've come from both as an athlete and now what you're doing in the business world with your academy. And we're going to touch on your shoe journey at the end of the show today, but kind of briefly mention anything that you think is relevant to the listeners.
Yeah, I was born in Eugene, Oregon. I was a multi-sport athlete at Sheldon High School, played 3 sports, pretty much my whole life, 4 sports at times, football, basketball, and baseball primarily. I earned a scholarship to Washington State University to play quarterback, where I was a 4-year starter. Got drafted in the 7th round by the Houston Texans in 2008, spent a couple years there, and then played 5 years in the Canadian Football League before finishing up and ultimately settling back to Portland, Oregon, where I started a family here, married my beautiful wife, Joni, have 2 young kids, Xander and Benny. And in that time, started a company with a good friend of mine named Ryan DePaulo, called E-Force Sports. And we primarily focus on youth and high school athletic development, sports-specific training, strength and conditioning. We operate athletic training facilities in the Portland Metro, Vancouver area, and in Bend. On the side, I've trained quarterbacks at a high level for almost 15 years now. I work with the Elite 11, which is kind of the preeminent quarterback competition, top high school quarterbacks in the country. Every year, 20 of them come to LA, and we pick the best of them. And so I get to see guys like Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, you name it. Any NFL quarterback you can think of right now I've seen in person as a high schooler. And then as a side, I'm an aspiring entrepreneur in various different ways. And one of those is a family shoe brand that my brother and I have restarted, which sounds like we're gonna get to talk about soon. But my expertise is certainly in sports and youth sports and athletic development for young people, from anywhere from youth, high school, and on up.
I would love to look at your calendar one of these days just to see because you didn't even mention that you do broadcasting, but both you have a show, you're a sideline reporter, you're the color analyst for the radio, like on top of all the other stuff you've got going on. I would love to see what that calendar looks like and the family calendar looks like.
Yeah, it's Monday through Sunday, wall to wall, that's for sure. So I do get to moonlight, as you said, as a radio broadcaster for my alma mater, Washington State. And so football season's quite busy right now, traveling to all the Washington State football games.
Yeah, and for anybody out there that has a young football player, here's my plug for you guys. You've obviously worked with my son since he was fifth grader, and then he's been a part of your academy the on the football side of things, and you guys just do such a great job and have what I believe is the right focus on how you go about doing things. But and I've told you this before, and I'm probably going to embarrass you, but you're probably the best teacher I've ever watched. I love just coming and watching you teach, even if it's not my own kid. The ability to, and it really is a unique. Lots of people know how to do things. What really separates great teachers is knowing how to do things and then getting that information out of your brain, using both words and body to get another kid to be able to replicate what you know inside of your brain or are able to do. And you do that as well as anybody that I've ever watched. I love watching you teach.
No, I appreciate you saying that, and that would make my mom proud. She was in education for 30 plus years as a kindergarten teacher, and then as a principal. Grade school, middle school principal. So I think she would appreciate that compliment. And in the end, right? Like, you've been around it with Kyler and I, and I would say this. I speak for everybody in our organization at eForce as well. Is we have an opportunity to impact young people, and it's through the lens of sport. But I mean, sport's just a pathway, right, to
Yep.
developing young people and to do great things, and be productive members of society and great husbands and wives, and fathers and mothers, and like all the things, right? And so, we're lucky enough to be able to have that opportunity.
Yeah, it can be, if done in the right way, the best classroom for life, right? Like, it is
Sure.
just an opportunity to teach those kinds of skills that for the long term are going to impact young people for the rest of their lives. So let's dive into your academy. Okay. So there's the traditional, I don't even know if traditional is the right word, but there's the club sport model, right? That is,
Mm.
I am a one sport athlete. I'm in that for 12 months a year, and we're being told to specialize in the third grade. And I do believe that there is a time for specialization
Sure.
later on in life if you're going to be a college player, or you are, you're moving into that realm, once you get into high school. But as a young person, very young, that's not, to me, the way to go about things. Why did you guys choose? Obviously, you have a baseball background and a football background, but your business partner is a football guy. Why did you guys choose to be multidisciplined in what you do, and not just in the sports, but with nutrition and physical therapy and training, and kind of the broad spectrum that the academy model brings versus just that traditional club model?
I think there was a couple pieces to that puzzle. There's our own personal experience, and if you had Ryan here, his is a little different than mine. But the idea is that ultimately we were both multi-sport athletes growing up, three sport athletes all the way through high school into college when we became football players. Ryan played at the University of Oregon, but we also had very different paths, right? Like, I was from Eugene, Oregon, and although I was a very gifted athlete, very productive at in my sports, I was physically underdeveloped. I didn't have a lot of extracurricular opportunities coming out of Eugene. Got to kind of taste a few here and there by driving to Portland and doing, had some college camp things in the recruiting process, but didn't get to experience, that level of development. Ryan was a walk-on at Oregon who very quickly earned a scholarship as he kind of earned his way through it. And so we had this personal background of, we wish we had more growing up, but also we realize our superpower was our kind of multidisciplinary experiences growing up. And so it was this idea of how do you kind of marry those things together with what we were seeing in the marketplace of what you're alluding to about club sports, which is that it is like wildly flawed, right, in a lot of ways, where community sport that I grew up on and you grew up on, unfortunately, is kind of going by the wayside for a number of factors, right? On all sides, right? Not just because of pay for play, but also because of community support and field and court availability, and participation, and all the things,
Taxpayer
right?
funding, right?
100,
Taxpayer funding. Yeah.
all of it, like that.
Yeah.
There's very real challenges with community driven sport, and that got replaced and co-opted by club sports that were focused on the wrong things, which was outcome oriented, right? It was focused on winning, playing games and winning championships and going D1 and all these things, and that started to push down athletes that maybe that either wasn't their goals or wasn't specifically what they wanted, or they couldn't afford it, or all these things. And so, for us, the vision of E4 Sports is a pyramid, right? At the top of the pyramid, you can have those, these high level Division I bound athletes that are striving for certain things. But at the bottom of the pyramid, there's this level of development that has to happen in a multi-sport way. And we anchor it to what I talked about the first time I came on, what's called long-term athlete development, LTAD. And that's a very well-known, for people that spend the time, it's a very well-known kind of philosophy around how athletes should develop through their sport journey. And at a really base level, and this is the best way to describe it, is that, we as athletes start when we're kids, picking up a ball at 2 years old and throwing it to mom and dad and just messing around. And then we go through this whole sport journey of teams and competitions, and maybe we play D1, maybe we play professional, whatever. But at the end of it, we're done. And when we're done, are we a stakeholder in sports? So are we a fan? Are we a coach? Are we a dad that likes to go play catch in the backyard with his kid because he loves baseball still, even though his sport journey ended with baseball? And so in the end, are you a stakeholder in sport? And you do that in long-term athlete development by doing it appropriately, which is, to your point about when you're younger, it's about certain things, right? When you're a high level high school, senior in high school, going to go play college, sure, the focus narrows, and that's okay. And so that's what E4 Sports is founded on, is our personal experience plus long-term athlete development plus all the things we believe make sport great, and what the end result should be for athletes, and creating a process that matches that.
So what? It's a great. It was a great description there. So the core principles at the ground of that pyramid, what are those for all the sports, right? Like what are those? Because I know that football, basketball, baseball, all the sports have some different skills that are required to throw, to shoot, to catch, to block. Like all of those are some different, but there's some core things underneath that all of those skills require to have. Where is that balancing for especially for young kids? What is that they should be looking for?
Well, there's kind of the way we look at it in like our academy in E4 Sports, which is like at the center of all your sports skill development. You're shooting a basketball, you're kicking a soccer ball, you're throwing a softball, whatever it is what we call performance training, but it's strength and conditioning. And it's age appropriate depending on where you're at, and kind of skill, body appropriate and those sort of things. But in the end, as no matter what, any athlete, you have to be fast, strong, agile, be able to prevent injuries. And along the way, while you develop those core skills, you also develop a lot of mental strength in having to stress your body and challenge yourself and go through that. So you develop things in the weight room and through strength and conditioning that I think are proven to be core tenets of your development as an athlete. And then around that, you're working on your skill development. So that is I'm in the gym shooting, I'm practicing throwing a football, whatever it is. And at the young age, that should those exposures, those practice development exposures should outnumber game exposures 10-1 weekly.
Yeah.
Like it's not even close. Like you shouldn't, if you're on a basketball team right now and you're playing 10 games a week and you're only practicing 2 times, you're in the wrong place. Like that's not the way it works. And so, trying to create the right amount of development exposures versus competition exposures is very important. And then kind of the last piece, not the last piece, but the holistic element of it is the neck up stuff, right? Are we talking about our mental wellness? Are we talking about our psychology in relation to winning and losing and challenges versus success and things that come with off field, all the off field things? Because the spotlight on that, very rightly so, is more so than ever, and it needs to be shown. It needs to be shined down and say, hey, just because an athlete is fast and strong and skilled and productive on the field or court does not mean that they have completed their sport journey, because they need the help, they need the support when it comes to their mental wellness. And that is a part that we focus on a lot with eForce and are continuing to build, because of the resources are continuing to get better.
That's great. So, and anybody that wants to hear more, we really drilled down on this on the first time, the first 2 episodes when we chatted. But I think we're going to go a different direction today, since I've got you for a second time here. But before we do, kind of talk through, and I think you did such a great job the first time. I think if people haven't listened to it, I think it's an important thing. You get, fast forward through the youth development, right? And I'm a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and I know I'm a multi-sport athlete, but I know that I want to be a high level person in my primary sport. Talk about that time that you have to carve out to make sure while I'm playing that other sport that I'm still focusing on what I really know in the end is where I'm going to be.
Well, in the end, you only have 24 hours, 365, right? Like that's just the reality of it. And the way, when you think about specifically in the LTAD model, they think about it in 4 seasons, right? Like you have kind of fall, winter, spring, and then summer. And obviously most sports fall in 3 of those: fall, winter, spring, particularly at the high school level. But so then you're trying to think about, what does my summer, what do my off seasons look like, whether it's summer or maybe I go from 3-sport athlete to a 2-sport athlete so that I can have kind of a development off season. But if you are playing 3 sports, which is great, I mean, there's a million reasons why you should, then you do have to carve the time out, right, in the morning or in the afternoon around practice or whatever, where you're in the weight room and you're doing your skill development. Because the one thing that can happen is if I want to be, a high level, I'll use quarterback because that's just a very intimate example. If I want to be a high level quarterback, but I'm a 3-sport athlete, the Alex Brink from 2003 was 6'2", 175 pounds, and 170 pounds probably if I was lucky. And I was a high level baseball player and a pretty good basketball player, and I hit the weight room as much as I could in the school setting. I didn't have great nutrition. I didn't have great focus on like what it meant. So like I tell people all the time, I got lucky. Like I got lucky that Washington State's coaching staff turned over and they offered me a scholarship 3 weeks before signing day. And I got there and I got on campus and, then I put on 30 pounds or whatever. But that opportunity is fewer and far between now, right? With the amount of athletes that are striving to find success, in high school and then into college. So, you have to carve the time out to put it in. There's, I think it's Trevor Moawad, the sports psychologist, that said like, hey, there's no in between. It's a binary choice of whether if you want to do it, like if you want to be great or not, like there's just some things you have to do. And so I think that sometimes gets conflated in the conversation around multi-sport, right? Like, and, being a single sport athlete or versus multi-sport athlete. It's not that anybody's saying you need to only play one sport, but you also need to understand if you're playing 3 sports, there's other sacrifices you're going to have to make to reach the goals you might want to reach at the highest levels. You know what I mean? And so that's that extra time. Where is that extra time? That would be my conversation to parents of young athletes, as they get into sophomore year of high school and they're saying they want to play Division I basketball or Division I baseball or whatever it is. It's like, okay, like then you need to do the things, you need to find the time to do the things that are necessary. And that can be hard. That can be hard at times because it's not just sports, right? It's school and it's life and it's all the stuff.
But that's also that area where the athletics becomes part of the education process, right? And part of that education process is learning how to manage your time to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to get done.
Well, look, like you were a high level basketball coach, at the Division I level. Like when did your athletes train? Like when did they lift, right? Like what time of day in relation to school and practice, right?
Yeah.
Early
in the morning.
Yeah, I was gonna say it was when I was in college, it was at 5 a.m. Like that's when I was
very early.
That's when I was working out. You know what I mean? So it's again, there's only so many hours in the day. So if it has to happen, it has to happen.
Yeah. All right. So it's good stuff. Let's transition into a different conversation here. So the state of college athletics has changed, obviously, since you played, and it's changed significantly even since I coached in the last 10 years. And I hear this, that the recruiting process has changed, that it's harder for high school student athletes to get recruited because of the transfer portal and kids not getting offered as many scholarships because coaches are waiting on to see what the portal looks like to fill their roster with kids that have already played in the Division I level. What are you seeing kind of as you're immersed in this? What are you seeing in sort of that change in the recruiting process for kids because of what's changed at the collegiate level?
Well, there's certainly some areas where it's kind of bifurcated to football and basketball versus, say Olympic sports. So there's conversation to be had there. But, in general, and I'm a proponent of player movement. Like I think the old model didn't work either. Like
Totally. I'm not in any way saying it. I think I always thought I say this all the time. Coaches could get up and leave anytime they wanted to,
Sure.
right? They could get fired or they could just take another job. And nobody made them sit out a year before they got to go coach somewhere else again. The idea that that's what we made kids do was just absolutely asinine to me. But so I'm all for the movement. I just know that there is a trickle down impact that's changed
Very much.
the way the recruiting process works. Not that there's not as many opportunities, it just happens differently.
Very much so. And I think the best way to describe it, right, is that, with some of the things around player movement is that, coaches need some level of control over their rosters, right? So being able to have, the ability to go get players that were at the collegiate level already, and so they've already had maybe the nutrition, right? Maybe whether they've played or not, they've been in the weight room for a year at whatever school. There's maybe a little bit more certainty around what you're getting in the transfer portal versus a high school athlete where there's an Alex Brink in the world that you got to put 30 pounds on when he gets to school and hope he pans out. So there's that element, with these coaches, they're trying to find every which way, right, to gain the advantage when it comes to recruiting because it's such an inexact science. And so in the recruiting process, they feel like if they've already made it to a school, right, or maybe they're at a smaller school, maybe they're at a Division II school, but they've played really well. At that point, it's like, okay, that's kind of a known commodity versus, the high school kid out of, wherever that just whether they're good or not, there's not as much certainty. So I think it's created, to your point, not less opportunity. Well, that's not true. It's created less opportunities. Like there's less opportunities for high school athletes to come out and find the success. And I can speak to that very simply in that, with the house settlement in football, they reduced the roster sizes from 130 down to 110, right? So just in Division I football, there's less roster opportunities for any player coming out. And so that pushes, right, the opportunities down into, lower levels of athletics. And then with the player movement, now you're holding roster spots, you're holding spots open longer, with the the transfer portal that's changing in the football ecosystem where it was 2 windows. There was a window in the kind of the late winter, early part of the year, and then a spring window. They're moving that just to 1 window now, right around the first of the year, which in my opinion is a good starting point. But again, it reduces the opportunities for high school athletes. And what I always say is that, for these high school athletes now coming out, you're just looking for the opportunity to get on a roster, right? It could be a scholarship. That'd be great. But if you can get in as a walk-on, that's awesome. If you can get a guarantee that if you're on campus as a student, that you're going to get a tryout in the next spring or in the next cycle, then that's a positive also, even though that sounds crazy to talk about. But with less preferred walk-on opportunities, with more scholarships going to transfer portal players versus high school athletes, you're just trying to find a way to get your foot in the door, which includes going to maybe a lower level than you expected or you wanted, and legitimately betting on yourself, because that's the flip side of the coin of the player movement era, is that with, before a Division II athlete, it was nearly impossible to go up. Like you almost could not go up. Yeah. For the most part. And so now, if I'm look, I was just called a game, Washington State versus Ole Miss. The Ole Miss starting quarterback is the Division II champion, right? Trinidad Chambliss at Ferris State. So, those situations never happened. And now you're seeing, how about basketball? How about Cedric Coward, right? Washington State guy, him, Willamette, Willamette University, Eastern Washington, Washington State, boom, he's a first round NBA draft pick. Those things are happening more, which is a positive, which just tells me with athletes and families, you have to be ready for all paths, and you're either committed to it or you're not. Because the days of just going somewhere to wear the practice jersey that says, Oregon State on it or Utah or whatever are pretty much gone. Like you got to go and earn that opportunity very much.
And it'll become normal. right? Eventually, this is going to become the new normal of what it feels like. In the interim
Yeah.
process right now, it's a bit confusing because what the generation right before this one went through in the recruiting process does not feel the same. But
Yeah.
eventually, this will become the new normal, and there won't even be any conversation. It just is what it is.
Yeah, and in a way, in a weird way, it maybe kind of gets you back to like what it all should be about anyway, right? Which is, this kind of process oriented, the process oriented idea of how athletics can help young people be great in every aspect of their life. And let me give you the quick example, which is that oftentimes at, again, that kind of top of the pyramid level of our academy, we would work with football athletes that, all they wanted to do was play Division I college football because of all the things that come with Division I college football. The problem is, again, those opportunities, the real opportunities are hard to come by, but you could get on a roster. Like you could end up at the University of Oregon, as a preferred walk-on because you're from the state of Oregon and they want to cultivate those relationships. And you could go there, but you never really got the opportunity to actually play ball or actually be a meaningful kind of part of that team and meaningfully experience athletics at a high level versus a number of other athletes went to smaller colleges to play football and had fantastic, college athletic experiences and played and were all Americans and won national titles. And then they graduated and had great degrees and went on to be successful business people. Like that's ultimately, right, like what this is all about at any level. And now it almost kind of forces people that direction that, hey, like the kind of like throwaway opportunity to go to a bigger school is not really there anymore. You're going to have, if you want to do this, you got to love playing the sport and love putting in the work and going and doing it and love the process, and the outcome is kind of irrelevant.
Yeah, I haven't coached at that small college level for a long time. I always told families and kids, and especially when I was at the small college level, don't get caught up with the D in the one or the D in the two or the NAI or the D3. Like get caught up in what the process is and the experience that you're going to have, and really do that research about where you're going to end up having the best experience for your future in your life,
Sure.
and what kind of coaching staff is going to be there to develop you along that, yes, the athletic path, but that path to becoming from an 18-year-old to a grown-up or more of a grown-up when
Right.
you graduate.
Yeah, I mean, again, like sport comes to an end. Like
Yeah.
whether you're 17 or 23 or 32 or fit, like like the competitive sport ends. And so like at that point when you go to live your life, what did you glean from your time as an athlete in your sport journey? Or what did you as a parent help your young athlete glean from that sport journey to help them be, successful in the rest of their life and all the aspects that really matter, which is not winning trophies and scoring touchdowns.
Let's talk about the recruiting process a little bit. It's something we haven't really gotten into here other than just kind of lightly touching on it from my background. But for you got a kid in your academy, right? That's a baseball guy, football guy, and I know you guys are doing some basketball too. But you have someone in your academy that is not a Division I athlete, and we know that, but they are a college level player, right? They can play at the collegiate level. What is that process like for them? When should they start sending out film? What should they email? Should they write a letter? What is that process like for them to get in front of the levels that they should be playing at?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few big rocks, right? Like typically you want to start engaging in the recruiting process once you've participated at a varsity level, right? Like at varsity baseball, varsity basketball, because that's really what the coaches are looking at, unless you have some physical gifts that are like, unless you're LeBron James as an eighth grader, like most people want to see you compete at the highest level
Don't
in high
send your
school.
freshman team basketball film to the college basketball
Please don't.
coach.
Please
Yeah.
don't. No, it's okay. Like again, it's like let's back it up. Until you play varsity sports, just worry about becoming the best athlete you can possibly be. Like that's it. That's why I tell people all the time. They say, I got these freshmen, Anthony Leverett comes to me and he's like, what should Kyler be doing to get in front of colleges? And the answer is nothing. He should be in the weight room. He should be working on his skills. He should be playing another sport. And like when he gets those varsity snaps, we can start having that conversation. And so that conversation becomes, you create your film. Typically, like every sport has a different version of it, huddle and football and basketball. And you create that film and you start getting it out to coaches, and you can engage in that in a few different ways. So, oftentimes, Twitter X is kind of like a great platform that people use. Coaches use it often. Other social media is kind of getting involved in that. But having a very comprehensive profile that says, this is my real name, this is what class I'm in, this is my height and weight, this is what sports I play, here's my contact info, like just my my email or whatever, how you get a hold of me is important. Sharing your film that way, finding the coaches and the organizations that you want to be a part of to send emails to. That takes some kind of internet sleuthing. Sometimes you got to kind of find the list and that sort of thing. I'm going to go on record right now and tell everybody, you shouldn't pay a dime for a college recruiting service to do the work for you. It will be the single worst investment in your life. And all this process takes is a little bit of time and effort on your part. Your athlete has to be of the appropriate skill level for whatever level we're talking about. And if you find some people like your high school coaches or your academy coaches in your life that will be advocates for you, that's enough. But do not spend a dime on a recruiting service, please.
Okay, can I back that up just from my background?
You were the D1 coach. You know better than I do.
If I got an email from a kid or from a scouting service about a kid, I knew that kid wasn't good enough to play. So like that was the first thing. They're paying someone to do that for them. That means that like it just is, the perception of that from coaches is not something that is going to be positively received. Do it yourself.
Yeah, and again, like ultimately you're paying for email you're paying for like you can find those things exist, right? And coaches would much rather get the email from Anthony Leverett's dad of Kyler just saying, hey, this is who I am, this is what it's about, here's his coach's info if you got a question. And like coaches and their staffs are paid to recruit and evaluate those things. They can do that if you provide them the information. So the avenues to get them that information, right, again, via email, via social media. There are some like decent like services that kind of aggregate like film and stuff that you can get plugged into. And in the football space, Catapult's one that is pretty well known. They oftentimes, these services run like they run combines or they run events where they aggregate data. Like that's fine, that's a different conversation. And so as you get that film, that's how you get that out. And you start the communication process. And recruiting is about building relationships. So you build relationships by communicating. You build relationships by attending things that those coaches or those schools might be at. And so in every sport, it's different. Oftentimes, not oftentimes, for sure, it is their college camp, either a camp they're running or a camp they are at. And the windows for that in each sport is different. In football, it's the worst version of it. There's only one time to do it, and that's in the month of June and a little bit of July. Other sports like basketball are a little more forward thinking. There's more opportunities to be seen by college coaches. And so finding ways to build relationships with college coaches by getting in front of them physically, whether it's, camps or showcases or, different sort of events, that's important. So, kind of the education process on what's the calendar for your specific sports, very important. The baseball calendar is different than the football calendar and basketball and so on. So you kind of know where to fit, because this is the overarching piece of this. A little bit like I told you how you only have 24/7, 365. Everybody has a limit as far as resources, time and money to be able to do these things. So it's very important, and we educate families often. How do you target the times and the places to go and be seen, right? You could throw a lot of money at the recruiting process and not get the outcome you want. And so educating yourself on what events are important, what windows are important, when it's time to jump on a flight and fly to Colorado to go visit the University of Colorado, those sort of things. I think that's all a part of this as you kind of go down the list.
I would add, especially at the small college level, the recruiting process happens later, right? Because everybody wants to be a Division I player, but all the way through their junior year. Like that's no one wakes up in the morning saying, I want to play JUCO basketball someday, right? Like you want to play at the highest level. And so there's this dream. And so the the process does happen later. And I think really important is not to get stressed. If you think you're a college player and you're playing against people that are playing at those smaller school levels, don't get stressed about the fact that you're not being recruited the same way that someone is at the big time level. That they're apples and oranges. They're not the same. And then second, I would say regionally, understand that there are tons of scholarships available at the NAIA level. Like
Yeah.
all of these NAIA schools offer money, and maybe not a full scholarship, but getting money to play your sport is a really cool thing in college athletics. And what those coaches, a lot of them want is your schedule. So make sure that as part of everything that you provide to them and on a regular basis, give them your high school basketball schedule, because that's when a lot of them are able to get out and watch you play. And I think high school baseball is very similar that way. I don't know about the football component of that, but be proactive in giving them opportunity to get to know you and give them your schedules so they can come see you play at that regional level if you're not a national recruit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's, just a quick aside, whether it's been covered on the podcast or not, is how the levels work and like what
Yeah,
that means, right? So
that's
like,
great.
you have your FBS level, like your kind of power four, group of five, some people call it, but that FBS level, sport, right? And that is full scholarships. They have typically they're some sort of, there's versions of it now, like say baseball and things like that, where they kind of can break the scholarships up, but each sport, right, has scholarships to give for their roster, right? Then you work down to the FCS level. Okay, same thing, they have scholarships to give, they have less scholarships than the FBS level. D2, same version, right? D2 has money to give, but it's significantly less that they kind of divvy out amongst their roster. So you might be getting packages, right? I might be getting my school paid for, but I got to pay for my meals and books and housing, or I might get some portion of that, right? Division 3, there's no athletic scholarships provided, but they do put, they try and put financial aid packages together, kind of tied to, what we can make happen around your personal financial situation. You're playing a sport, all these things. And then you mentioned the NAIA level is often overlooked, that they have money to give as well. It's often really good sport, like good athletics, good schools, things like that. And so kind of knowing what you're getting into when it comes to what kind of money can be given as a scholarship, what, can scholarships be broken up? Can my academic standing, or if if I have good academic standing, I can get scholarships over here for academics. I can marry him with some athletic money, and now I have a full scholarship. Like all those things are on the table. So understanding the level you're getting recruiting at is really important. And then the last thing I would say to that is, I used the term earlier, and just so it's not over people's head, what people call walk-ons or preferred walk-ons, that would be at a scholarship level school. I'm going to go and be a part of the team, but I'm going to pay my own way. So I have a roster spot, but I'm paying for school. I'm paying for these things, right? And that's a way to get your foot in the door. But again, these roster numbers, like the number of allowable, roster spots, like football, use the example, is being reduced, right, to kind of save money across the board. And so there's less of those walk-on spots, and that's, so when I use that term, people understand like what that means exactly.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things you just mentioned, not exactly like this, but people will often think, well, my kid's a Division I kid. And when my question was, well, who's recruiting them? And if you're being recruited by NAIAs and non-Division I, you're an NAIA level player. Like that's and there are and panicking about where's my kid going to end up. There's no secrets left. I mean, it's rare where some kid gets all the way through high school and all of a sudden he just blows up or she blows up and they're a Division I player. I mean, it still happens now and again, but if your kid is good, they're going to get seen, they're going to get noticed, the word's going to get out, and they're going to end up being recruited at the level that they should be recruited at.
Well, and now with this kind of player movement, and transfer portal stuff, if they are a Division I player, whether it's in high school or past high school, they can get there, right? So that's again, I use the Said Coward example because he started at, Lama University playing
Yeah.
basketball, and then he ends up at the highest level. Not, he ends up Division 1, and then he's in the NBA. He got there because his development. It's not like he got missed out of high school. He was not there out of high school,
That's
and
right.
then he developed to that point. And so that's a very real conversation too, right? And so, your athlete might be a Division 1 athlete, but they might not be that now, right? Or they might not be. But to your point about what does that mean in their recruiting process, you do have to be very honest. And this is a huge part of what we do at eForce is just saying, hey, this is where you're at today, right? And it might be because of your physical tools. It might be because of, your playing time. It might be because of injuries, like whatever, like, but this is where you're at. And so this is the focus. Like a great example is if you are going through the recruiting process and you want to play college football and you've played, 1 year of varsity and you're heading into your senior year, you don't have any meaningful recruiting conversations, but you think you're good enough to play and you've played varsity and you're trying to build those relationships. When the summer camp season comes around and you only have 5 weeks to do it, you shouldn't jump on a flight and fly to Ohio State to try and get a scholarship at Ohio State. Like it's just not going to happen. Like it's too late at that point, or it was never going to happen anyway. And you're spending a lot of money to go get a t-shirt from the Ohio State camp. You should go find, these schools regionally that make sense that you can, again, in the process, like you can get that opportunity to get going. And we've had kids that were late bloomers and their first offer was Montana, and then their next offer was Oregon State, and then their next offer was Oregon, and then their next offer was SC, and it all happened 2 weeks before signing day. But like that's few and far between, right? Like that doesn't happen that often. So just knowing again where to focus your time and energy and resources in the process is super important.
So you brought it up, and I think this is for I think this will be your advice, but I'll ask you, how important are those camps / showcases for kids to go to? In football, basketball, I couldn't agree more, or I couldn't like make this point firm enough. If you want to go to a school, go to their camp. It'll give you an opportunity to feel what it feels like to be coached by them and be around the players and be on the campus in a different way. Is that something in football and baseball that you guys recommend as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's think of it like a pie, right? So you get this pie, and like by far the most important thing is, your kind of highest level competitive experience. So in football, that's varsity football. In basketball, that's usually varsity basketball, but the AAU circuit's big enough where it could be what you do on the AAU side. Kind of same with travel baseball, right? Like some of these sports have like, unfortunately, like, co-opted high school sport as the place. But whatever your highest level of competitive, film and competitive experience, like that's number one. Like, do you have that, right? And then the next thing is typically your physical tools. As long as you're above a certain physical threshold, like we got to have certain physical tool. Like I'm not going to go play center in the NBA. Like I'm 6'2". Like it's not going to happen.
Come on,
You know what I
man.
mean? Yeah. So you know what I mean. So like there's physical tools too, but that's a part of it. But then as we work around that pie, that next piece of the pie in the recruiting process would be your experience in front of those college coaches. So oftentimes that's very limited in the calendar year. It's a handful of showcases or a handful of camps. Like you might only have 2 to 4 exposures in front of, the Washington State football staff in the entire calendar year. You got to go do that. Like you got to get in front of those guys at a camp or, on campus or at one of their a showcase event that they might have or a satellite camp. So yeah, like in the development process, it's like your film, your experience in front of those coaches, obviously your physical tools, I'm not even going to include it because that doesn't count. And then it's kind of like your development skills and all the extra stuff. So in our world, it would be like, say like 7-on-7, or in basketball, it might be some extra kind of like showcase style events or some things that like coaches aren't at or whatever. Like being in front of coaches in person is number 2 on the list as far as it comes to getting recruited behind your actual like competitive film.
And on the, just as we're talking about this, because on the basketball side is doing that at the appropriate time, right? Because if you go play in a club tournament as a freshman with a bunch of freshmen in a tournament that you don't belong in, you're going to get wiped off that list and no one's ever going to watch you again. Like it's making sure that you're prepared to be in front of those coaches at the time when it matters. And like that is a critical component to the recruiting process.
Yeah, it kind of goes. That's the development piece, right? Like from sixth grade to sophomore year, like
That's
you
right.
shouldn't even think you shouldn't even thinking about recruiting.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean? Like again, unless you have some freakish physical talents that like are you're ahead of the curve just naturally, you should be focused on develop. Like be the best athlete you can be, and be the best insert position you play in the sport you play you can be, and then like go from there, right? Because worrying about college recruiting as an eighth grader or as a freshman like isn't right. You should be educated. You should kind of know what to expect, but you should be focused on development, the development first.
Get better, baby. Get better every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. Let's get off of youth sports for a minute here, or for the rest of the time here. And I want to talk
That's
about
why
the
we're here.
college football playoff, man. I want
Yeah.
to talk about, you're immersed in this stuff, obviously. Washington State, unfortunately, the Pac-2 is on the outside looking in this year.
Not the best
But
year.
it's not the best year so far, and I won't bring it up anymore. But as you're watching this from having been immersed in this as a player and now as a broadcaster, and I mean, you got guys that you've coached and that you've worked with that are all in the middle of this right now, right? Like that, It's got to be fun to watch guys that you've worked with be right in the thick of all this. What are you what are you most excited about? What do you see happening the rest of the way in the playoff?
Well, I think this is a very unique year, and probably it's it speaks to a little bit what's happening with the state of college athletics, which is that you are seeing more parity across college football. You're seeing the Indianas of the world, who's perennially a basketball school and not a football school, as they're the arguably the best team in the. We're going to find out quickly if they're the best team in the country, but certainly top 2 or 3 teams in the country. Basically because they hired the right coach, who brought half of his team from James Madison, Kurt Signetti from James Madison, brought
It's
half
a
of his
whole
team,
different world, man.
which kickstarted things at Indiana, which is a very well-resourced school in a very, athletically minded state. Great fan base that was able to jump on it and fund it appropriately so he could go get a Heisman level quarterback, who wasn't a Heisman level quarterback. That staff recognized that Fernando Mendoza was a Heisman level quarterback, but they needed money to pay him and so on and so forth. So, again, there you can create parity in that Alabama, even though they're in the mix for the CFP, they're not the far and away leader in the CFP like they would have been in the Nick Saban era, because Alabama could stack 4 and 5 star athletes 2 and 3 deep on their roster. They would have to stay there for 5 years, which means they couldn't get out into the marketplace. And so Alabama and Georgia and they were always the best, right? And now that's just not the case, because the players, with the freedom of movement, teams get better faster if you get the mix right. And so that's what's fascinating to me about this year, is that I think Ohio State. It seems like Ohio State and everybody else, and maybe Indiana. But it could be any given Saturday. We saw Penn State almost beat Indiana, right? Everybody wrote Penn State off. Obviously, Indiana went in and beat Oregon at Oregon, and so that's what's cool to me, because I do think the old version of the CFP pre-transfer portal was getting a little stale, right? You were seeing Ohio State and Alabama all the time, right? You were seeing Clemson, Alabama, and it was like, Cincinnati never had a chance, and now you are seeing teams. More teams have be in the mix. You're also seeing 2 loss teams. You're not out of it because you lose 1 game, right? You can be a 1 loss team or a 2 loss team. I love the stipulation that the highest ranked conference champion outside of kind of that group of 4 gets in. Like, I think that's great. Like, a lot of people say that's not good, and I think that's the best thing for the sport, because it gives people like James Madison or Memphis or Oregon State and Washington State a chance, and that's what, right? Like, why do we all watch March Madness? It's not to watch Duke and North Carolina win it every year. It's to watch VCU make a run and figure out who Shaka Smart is. Like, that's why we watch it, right? So I love that part of it. I think this year, I'm not sure who the best team is. Ohio State's got the best defense and probably the most complete roster, but there's some question marks offensively, and Indiana looks really good. And I think Oregon could jump up and get you anytime. And Texas Tech's got the most expensive roster in sports outside of the NFL. I don't know. It's that part of it's all very new and interesting to me.
I'm rooting for chaos. Um,
You're getting it.
Dusty Hare and I were talking the other day, and he pointed out that if Duke wins out their conference schedule, which it looks like they could, they will be in the conference championship game of the ACC. And if they were to win that, there would be a 4-loss ACC school as the champion, and the ACC may not get somebody in the playoffs. Like that would be absolute chaos. So I'm a Duke fan, football fan for I've never been a Duke fan for anything in my life. I am now a Duke football fan rooting for chaos.
Well, in the same vein, right? Washington State, they're having an okay year, 4-5, new coach, like all these things. It it the second to last game of the season, Cougs are traveling to James Madison, and James Madison right now is in the driver's seat to be that to be that highest ranked non-power four champion. And so Cougs can play spoiler out there, like James Madison. It's a whole thing. Like it's again very. I think it's good. It's good for the sport, in my opinion.
Oh, I agree, and it keeps more eyeball. I mean, not that people don't watch football anyway, but there is so much more fan participation and hope, right? Everybody just wants a little bit of hope as a fan that my team's going to be a part of the tournament, going to get a chance. And this is really expanded it. And the people who were afraid that, like this was going to make the sport worse, it's football. It's not making the sport worse.
Sure. Yeah. It's no, it's not making it worse. It's making it better.
All right, let's talk about, we're going all over the place here today, but I love this. I could talk to you for hours, but let's talk about your shoe brand. So we talked a little bit about it. Kind of give us just a brief overview again of how it started, but where are you now? Like I saw a post on LinkedIn. This was it sometime this week that has some different colored shoes out there potentially. And we're moving forward with the tariff game. You got you guys back in. Are you back in? Are you back in the mix? Or how much is that impacting?
We need a little bit more. Yeah, well, plenty. Okay, so the quick background. So the shoe brand is called Osaga. My grandfather was in the shoe business for felt like his entire life, but basically it was my entire life knowing him. The quick background is that he started retail shoe stores in the state of Oregon called Birch's, kind of originally found in Eugene, Oregon. Fast forward, he created what is known as a brand called Bogs, which are waterproof insulated boots that my uncle went and took and grew. And so most people will probably recognize Bogs kind of in the marketplace. But in the 70s, my grandfather and another uncle were working in the shoe store, and they kept seeing, as Nike, this was like right when Nike started, and Nike's creating running shoes for high performance runners. That's what Bill Malvin, that's what he was doing, right? With Phil Knight. But there was a group, there was kind of a cohort of people that were bringing in what were sneakers that were typically being made overseas. They were not Nikes, there are other things, and they just weren't very well made. And so my grandfather's like, there's a marketplace for a casual wear athletic shoe that is not Nike, kind of more in the kind of Asics Saucony version a little bit. And so he started Osaga in the early 1970s, right about the time Blue Ribbon Sports and Nike were going. And they were very successful. They manufactured shoes in China, shipped them over here, sold them throughout the country. And it was a really powerful brand during that time, from kind of early 70s into the early 80s. And they had, if you read the book Shoe Dog, like Phil Knight was, he's financing the shoes through a bank here, getting them made in China, getting them shipped back here, selling them out of the trunk of his car and doing the whole thing, and living on what he called the float, right? So then paying back the bank once he sold the shoes. And my grandfather and family, they were doing the same thing, and unfortunately had some production issues and had some challenges where they got over their skis, and ultimately it didn't work out. And so Osaga has been kind of dormant for the last 35, 40 years. My brother and I decided in 2020, like everybody else during the shutdowns and all the things, that we should try something crazy and do something new. And so we spent 5 years developing shoes, and revived the brand Osaga around the original colorways and the original designs of what they called the KT26 and the Osaga 80, two a little bit different silhouettes. And we got our first container of shoes right before the January 1 of 2025, so under the wire of tariffs. And yeah, we've been selling shoes primarily D2C via our website, osaga.com, a few small retail partners. and it's been going pretty well. I mean, it's a hard business to be in, but great response to the quality of the shoe, which is most important. Obviously, it's a really unique brand story because everybody knows Nike and Adidas, but like when they hear about the small family shoe brand that was alongside Nike, and so that's been really fun. So we are in the process. We have developed our second round of colorways and kind of shoes to bring over. Tariffs are a problem. We don't want to charge 50% more for shoes that are being made at a factory in China. And so we got to see how that plays out. But yeah, we're
You mean
super
the
excited for
consumer has to pay that extra amount?
somebody does, and it can't be us because we don't have enough in it, but the consumer certainly won't. So in our situation, it would be the consumer, which we would do not want. In some other situations, sometimes it's the importer or the business. But yeah, we're excited for the holiday season, like obviously Black Friday and Christmas. We're excited to get shoes on feet, and we want people to know the story because it is really special. It's a family story, and it's as soon as I told it to you, and you can
I wore them.
I know you had some. So
I had a pair. I lived in the Eugene area when I was probably 1979, 1980, somewhere in that range, first grader, second grader. And that was my go to school shoe.
And I've heard so much of that. I mean, one of the first people that reached out to me on LinkedIn was a guy by the name of Scott Reams, and he was the historian at Nike for like 30 years. And it turned out that his father, my grandfather, hired his dad to come be like employee number one at Osaga, and that's why Scott's family moved out to like the Eugene area to Oregon. And his dad was like a huge piece of that run in Osaga from kind of mid 1970s, and he had all this great stories, and he worked in the warehouse at one point. And so it's been fun to hear people via LinkedIn or just reaching out and just people saying like, gosh, I remember this, I had a pair of these, like these are so cool. And to be able to match that with like quality, like actually create a shoe, which is wild, like very difficult, is wild. Like credit to my brother Ben, who spent a ton of time on this to make it happen. That part's been really fun. Like we are figuring out how to run a shoe business and do it, but it's I think we have something here, and we're excited to grow it, and appreciate anybody's support that wants to check out osaga.com.
I want to see your calendar. The next time we're together, I want to see what that calendar looks like, man. You got so many irons in the fire. I don't know how you do it.
Let's see. We got here. I'm gonna put. We'll check it out.
And I feel honored that you've given me 3 hours.
We got a lot going on.
That's what I thought it looked like. It's good stuff. Well, Alex, thank you so much. We got 2 things to get to at the end here. I don't know if you remember the first time I asked you the advice you give yourself when you went back in time. Do you remember what advice that was?
Well, there was a couple. For me, I remember it being around kind of recruiting. For me, it was like the nutrition piece. Like
nutrition. You wish that you would have started eating better and gotten nutrition. So you can't do that one. So now we go back and second piece of advice, everything you've been through, now that you own a shoe company, an academy, you're on TV all the time, your voice is broadcast all over the place. What advice would you give yourself going back in time?
I think there's a piece of the puzzle. Again, I talked about that mental wellness piece a little bit that I just think is nutrition and strength, all that stuff. Like there's a place there where I think everybody needs to have a recognition of how they manage like their own mental wellness, whether it's yoga or therapy or reading books or whatever it is. And like, I wish that I'd had that recognition earlier, because I think it would have really helped me, not only in athletics, but like it would have helped me, kind of as I've navigated all these paths. And like, I feel like I have a decent process now, but I wish somebody early on, or I could tell myself like, hey man, like dive in on your wellness journey, make sure you have great mentors, make sure you have, all the support you need for all these things. And don't be afraid to, ask if like you need help, you need something. And I think that can benefit everybody. It certainly would benefit me. I'm striving for it every day. And so, I think that's really where that goes for me.
It's such a great point. We were talking about this on the last show we recorded yesterday or Monday. And just, with the kid in Dallas, what just happened with him. And then the community that I live in that has experienced, as some pretty horrific suicide issues in batches, and understanding that what you see on the outside of somebody, this is a little different twist than what you just said of doing it for yourself, but being someone on the other side of just making sure that every day that we're thinking about someone across from us, that what you see on the outside may not be what's going on inside of them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, it's so true, right? Like, just, ask people how they're doing, check in on them, like give people a call, don't take it for granted by any means.
All right, man. Well, this is kind of a horrible segue from that to this, but last thing of the day, dad joke. What do you got a new one for me?
We did this last time. No, I don't remember. I'm not funny. No, listen. I have one. Hold on.
Oh, you got one.
This is so good. It's not even mine. I can't even take credit for it.
You don't have to take credit for it. That's the beauty of them.
My 2.5-year-old Benny told me this joke the other day.
Perfect.
He said, why did the coach go to the bank?
Why did the coach go to the bank? I have no idea. Well, I don't know. Why?
To get his quarterback.
Did he really? Where did he hear it?
I think somebody at like preschool, like a teacher at preschool, told it to him or something. He came
Oh,
home
that's
and
fantastic.
delivered that stone face to my wife and I started dying. And he's told us this a couple times since, because he got such a good reaction. So,
oh, that is fantastic, to get his quarterback. And I don't even know if you can get a quarter at the bank anymore. Can you get a roll of quarters at the bank anymore? Do they even exist?
Probably not.
All right, man. Well, God, it was great to have you on. Really appreciate you taking the time out of that schedule. And look forward to this. Football season's almost over here. I look forward to watching you teaching and coaching this spring. It's one of my highlights of my weekend, is getting to watch a few minutes of Alex Brink teaching kids how to play football.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it. Take care.